And Ilya is starting now.
Hi everyone, I'm Ilya and I'm going to talk about sub-signatures and whether we still need them or not. So I actually have been using them for quite a long, for several years, and they appeared first in version 5.20 and they've been experimental feature since then. To enable signatures, you need do something like this, like load an experimental model with signatures argument, and after that you can define them during the subroutine declaration and use them. So we can just run this piece of code and it will print hello world. Everything is fine. And sub-signatures also can check when there are too few arguments, bless you, or too many arguments, like when we put something unrelated, it tells us about that. And we can provide default values for the argument, which is also great. So we can just call the function without any arguments, and it will just show the right thing to us. Is it handy? Yes, I think it is. But recently at work, I had a really interesting case where I started to think that sub-signatures might not be that handy as they were for me. So we had a method with a really long list of signatures of parameters, and essentially I wanted to refactor it to be more readable. I tried to use signatures first to get all the benefits of them, like checks of number of parameters and so on. But then I realized that probably the list is too long, and it's better to use positional parameters, named parameters instead of positional ones. So I just used arg method, and the checks for, well, very superficial checks, but they were lost, and it made me sad. So I just decided to write the checks myself. So I checked if there is a toLength, if there is English phrase ID and group IDs and so on. And after that, I decided that I probably need to check that these parameters actually look like something that we expect. So they're not just defined, but they correspond to like array reference or look like a number and so on. But I have written lots of code already, but it's not the real code, it's just the checks. So I decided that we probably could use some model that provide argument checking. One of the older ones is regex common. It's battle tested, probably too much battle tested for today. And the more modern one is type tiny, which provides widely used in most infrastructure type constraints. And even more important, it has type params model, which provides parameter validation using these type constraints. So here's how the function which I had looks with type params. So essentially it exports the function called compiled named, and you can pass your constraints to this function, and return value is a check, it's a subroutine reference that you can store as a state variable to avoid repeated initialization of it. And when you call it on the argument list, you get a hash ref of arguments that you can then use further in your methods. So I think it's quite useful already. So if we use it and run this code, we get something like that for incorrect parameters, so missing required parameter error, or maybe type constraint violation for a positive integer. So quite useful. There is one type I had here. So for example, the original parameter name is English phrase ID, but I wrote it as English praise ID here, so just accidentally. And the error like this won't be noticed by compile named by type params. So, but type params provides a very handy workaround for that. It exports compiled named OO function, which essentially makes check function return an object. So arg is currently an object, and arguments are this object's attributes. So when I use something like incorrect attribute name and run it, I get the appropriate error that shows that I'm using invalid accessor. Okay, so type params also supports checking of positional parameters, default values for parameters, predicates for the cases when you want to check whether the parameter has been passed at all, and multiple signatures for functions, and many more. So if you use type params, would you still need the built-in signatures? I'm not sure. You should decide for yourself. Thank you.
Okay, Santiago is doing a